Hello, Ross Stancotti for Michigan Family Law. Last week we were talking to Mr. Richard M. Brewer, who is a referee for the Unemployment Commission here in the state of Michigan. And we were talking about the poor fella who had been let go by his employer and was attempting to file for unemployment benefits. And the employer had indicated on his information form to the commission that he had let the man go for not doing his job right. And we had learned from Mr. Brewer that not doing your job right was not a good enough reason to deny a laid off or fired employee unemployment benefits. And today we're going to be talking to Mr. Brewer about what is good enough or what kind of conduct it takes to deny benefits to an employee. Richard, I guess not doing work which meets the standards of the employer isn't going to keep me from getting benefits, is it?
Not necessarily. Per se, I would say, it wouldn't prevent you from getting benefits if you have been doing the best you could. Just incompetent, incapable, that sort of thing, that's not misconduct. That won't disqualify you.
If the employer puts me in a situation where I just can't meet his standards, it's not my fault.
Well, if you've done the best you could, there was no wrongful intent involved, no persistent neglect, anything like that.
All right, let's get to areas where my conduct as an employee would prevent me from receiving benefits. Now, what's supposing that I come to work late? The first time. I come to work late. I've been employed by this man for about 6 weeks, and I've always come to work on time. But today, I came to work late. I wasn't very late, half hour. Something happened at home. One of the kids got sick and couldn't find babysitters while mother took the other one to the doctor, and there I was, a half hour late. And when I get there, my employer is standing at the door and he says, "Look, you're just a new employee. Been here 6 weeks. I won't tolerate this. You're fired." Now, you know, I've been a good employee for 6 weeks. This is my first time I've been late. I come down and I see you, and I don't see you, I see this administrator. I file my forms for unemployment. They send the forms to the employer. The employer writes back and says, "I fired this man because he was late." And the administrator then gets the information from the young man or the man who's been working for 6 weeks and finds that this is the first time that the man had been late. And he even has the administrator even has some conversations with the employer and finds out that the employee worked, his work was adequate, he did good work, but this was just the time. He wasn't going to take it. He wasn't going to have this employee come late even this first time. Can I, as an employee who's been late once, be fired and then not get unemployment benefits?
No, that wouldn't be disqualifying. You get a single instance of unavoidable tardiness doesn't constitute misconduct.
Let me go a little further. There's a big sign on the wall where I work. If you are late just once, that's enough for you to be fired. Now, I've been warned. And I knew that if I babysat my children while my wife took the other child to the doctor, that I was going to lose my job. No, I knew it. There's the fact that I knew that I was going to be fired. There's the fact that I came to work late intentionally. Is that going to keep me from getting those workman's compensation?
Well, I hardly think we could say you came to work late intentionally. You came to work late because there was circumstance beyond your control, just an incident, situation there which didn't give you any choice. Hopefully you called the employer and said, I'll be a little late this morning.
I didn't.
But the sign on the wall probably could be deemed part of the contract of hire, which is not determinative of one's benefit rights.
So even if I had a contract in writing saying you can't be late and you know, and if you are late, you're going to be fired, whatever agreement there is between my employer and I, be it with myself or with my union or however that contract comes about with regard to benefits and whatever, you still have the right to declare that I'm entitled to unemployment benefits, or your office does.
Yes, if they don't find misconduct,
All right. So
and they shouldn't find it under the circumstances you described.
All right. Let me take a little further. I was late, and the employer was angry, and he docked me a half a day pay and said, hey, it better never happen again. And 3 weeks later, it happened again. Now he fires me. How about twice?
Why did it happen the second time?
Same reason, same reason.
Still wouldn't disqualify you, although he may decide you're not dependable enough to continue to be his employee. If you got an unavoidable situation over which you don't have any control that results in an unavoidable tardiness or absence, that's not misconduct.
Well, Mr. Referee, how about if over a 6-week period I have been late 8 or 9 times and always for the same reason? I have this sickly child, and for some reason I am not seen fit to go out and do something about when I wake up in the morning and have to go to work to take care of this situation. And I've now been late that many times over 6 weeks.
Well, then you better be prepared to prove to that claims adjudicator, let's say convince the claims adjudicator, or ultimately the referee, that this was just an absolutely unavoidable situation. You couldn't do anything about it.
All those times?
Every time. So you developed a pattern there. The burden of proof then shifts from the employer to show misconduct to the employee to show that he or she could not avoid this tardiness.
Oh, but I'm going to show that every time. I'm going to show that for almost, I mean, I could do that forever now, and I'm still going to be able to get my unemployment benefits, aren't I?
Not necessarily. You better be pretty persuasive.
All right, I've got some problems in about that time. All right, let's talk about, I want to stop talking about what might be, no, I don't want to. I'll keep on going. I'll keep on going. Let's talk about if being late with a good excuse is not going to get me fired, at least as long as I don't do it an intolerable amount of times, is going to prevent me from getting unemployment compensation. How about striking another employee, a co-employee? Let's first of all, let's assume for the purposes of of trying to find out what is bad, what have I done that's bad that'll get me off of getting unemployment compensation. Let's supposing that I didn't have any reason whatsoever. I just came to work that morning and I was a bad-tempered person to begin with, and the guy said, "Good morning," and I just didn't like the way he said it, and I hauled up and hit him right in the mouth. And my employer said, "Hey, I'm not going to tolerate this kind of attitude around here. You're fired." All right, I have no reason. I just am I have a bad attitude and a bad disposition, and I'm now coming down, and you better pay me. I want my unemployment compensation.
Sounds like you're about to punch out the claims clerk, too.
Yeah.
No,
I'm not nice to her either.
You'd be disqualified. There's a provision in the statute that imposes disqualification for a discharge for assault and battery connected with your work.
How about I didn't strike him, but I called him a number of vile and abusive names? enough so that the employee, my co-employee, was so disturbed that he went into the employer and said what I called him. And the employer came out to my workplace and said, "Did you call so-and-so this and that and this?" And I said, "You're damn right. What are you going to do about it?" And he fires me.
All right, now that may fall into that misconduct definition.
All right, I want to know, have I been a person who has committed a misconduct so that I'm not going to get my unemployment compensation?
Well, there's where you come in. You just have to assess the entire situation. Maybe a single instance of misbehavior of this kind wouldn't be regarded as misconduct. I had a case, something like that, a while back, where we didn't have a great deal of, quote, verbal abuse, but we had some that was pretty earthy, and the guy got fired for it. And there were a lot of details. He'd been there for a good many years, always done a good job. This was the first time that he'd ever behaved that way. So I decided that didn't rise really to the level of misconduct. As a matter of fact, a day later, he apologized for his behavior. Of course, he was fired during the interim.
So the first time of doing that might not get me disqualified.
No, but you're skating on pretty thin ice, because the next thing you know, that fellow might want to punch you in the nose, and you might decide to punch him back, and then you really got a problem.
Well, let me take you to another area, all right? I think we talked about this area before this program began. I'm not very well educated, but I'm a good worker. I work very hard. And my employer has me working in an area of town through the telephone, and I have to cover this area. And it isn't me who's doing the calling, it is outside people who are calling in, and they're giving me orders, and I am to expedite these things. And I am, gosh, I'm working like crazy. And one day I go into my employer and I say, "Look, I can't take this. You have to put in another phone. You have to get somebody else to take half the calls or something, because I just can't take this." And my employer says to me, "Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to get you some help." But he doesn't. And 2 weeks go by, and I go back to my employer and say, "Look, God, I'm cussing out my wife. I have no patience left. I'm becoming physically ill with the work I have to do here. I don't want to let you down, but you got to get me some help." And the employer said, yes, I think that you're right. I will get you some help. And 2 weeks later, I come back. And I say to you, "I quit. I can't take it anymore." And I walk out. And you find another employee somewhere in a plant as the employer and put him on that phone.
Okay.
And the next morning, I come back. And I say, "Look, I didn't mean it. I was very upset. It worked on me. I'd worked so hard the night before. And when I got in here in the morning and the phone started ringing before I even sat in my chair, I just couldn't take it, and I want my job back." And the employer says, no, I'm sorry. We've already found somebody else to take your place. I'm sorry you quit, and you can't have your job back. Now, I go down, and I'm filing my unemployment compensation, and I want to tell you that the facts come in just that way. The administrator gets the facts from the employee as to what happens, and the employer agrees that this is what happened, that he did, in fact, admit that that he did promise help, that he didn't give help, and that she quit, and that he did, in fact, find somebody in the factory or in the workplace that was already there and took over, and no, he wasn't going to give the job back. Now, this is a mental situation, is it not?
Okay, well, let's make you the trier of fact there.
All right.
What you're going to have to do is decide whether this employer's behavior was such as would move the average, reasonable otherwise qualified individual to quit. Now, if you think that's the kind of behavior the employer engaged in, then this claimant should not be disqualified.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that I have to find, as a matter of fact, if I was the referee, I have to find, as a matter of fact, that the employer was willfully engaged in this kind of conduct, or
No,
intentionally
just
engaged?
was his behavior such? There'd have to be a wrongful element in there.
That any reasonable person would have quit?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now, you've got two promises of help. The guy has continued to work, obviously, on the assumption that the employer is going to keep these promises to give him help. But the employer hasn't done it. And that strikes me as coming pretty close to the kind of behavior that would move any reasonable employee to quit, if the work is all that strenuous. Now, there are other things that you'd have to consider, too. Now, was there any reason why that employee just couldn't have done the best he could and let the boss worry about the work that he wasn't getting done?
Oh, I'm very conscientious.
All right.
Very conscientious. I couldn't do that. I'd have to answer every phone. I couldn't bear to think that somebody's out there and couldn't get to me.
All right, there's a factor to consider. Now, here's something else. And the employee comes in and he says, yes, this is the kind of behavior the employer engaged in, and it just moved me to quit because it was quite obvious I couldn't depend on him to get me the help that I have asked for and so obviously needed, and that he promised to get me.